my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm going to review the Pulitzer Prize winning book before it goes right back to the library soon, by Joshua Cohen, The Netanyahus, an account of a minor and ultimately even negligible episode in the history of a very famous family. Very important to know about this book is its academic humor, meaning the paragraphs are quite meaty. It's from the perspective of an actual academic, a historian named, what did he make it? Reuben Blum. And the significance of that will become apparent quite soon. So it is very meaty, it's fairly dense, the diction is playful, and that's where some of the humor shines through, but mostly the meta-construction is where you'll get the humor in this book. Although, as you progress through it, you'll notice a through line of absurdism that becomes ultimate mayhem, essentially, as it goes on. And it is kind of, but not really, based on Harold Bloom, who told the story to Joshua Cohen, and it, in its iteration, took on a mythological sort of status that was then itself revisionist history, as Cohen took hold of it and appropriated it and made it do essentially what he wanted to do to the story. And Ben Zion Netanyahu, the father of the person who would become a predominant leader in Israel, who popularized, normalized the thinkings articulated in this book by Ben Zion, revisionist, ahistorical stuff that allowed Israel to reframe cultural thinking, essentially. And so what ends up happening is that Reuben has found out that the college has been solicited on behalf of Ben Zion by a colleague of his, giving a recommendation letter to hire on somebody at the college, and they are putting forth Ben Zion's name in order to be considered, which means that they would like Reuben, as the only Jewish person in the college, to vet and be on the committee that decides whether he'd be let in and actually given a professorship at this place. It is very much centered on the politics of the day. Reuben is an older man telling this story of this happening to him at a younger time, so it's an interesting perspective. And then it's ultimately quite chilling, as in the vetting process, Reuben and everybody at the professorship listen to what his thesis, his exploration, his centering of history is, and its lack of rigor, essentially. And ultimately what this means is that Reuben, as an apolitical Jewish person, essentially, I picture him as like very much on the fence, probably vaguely leftist, as Americans go. There isn't really leftists. Reuben tells his life story in brief detail, in which he suffers from quite a bit of anti-Semitism, and it is a through line in his life where he has to deal with it at the college as well. He's essentially characterized as like the only Jew person basically there. And he has to host Netanyahu and deal with this rhetoric, essentially, as well as be confronted with someone whose Jewishness is like much more centered on a European outlook and antagonistic to diaspora identities such as Reuben himself. And so really the book is about ideologues, their confrontation with each other, and so the meta aspect of it is kind of what makes it genius to me. The idea of using a story that is, semi-revisionistic already, and then revise it into a mythological sort of story about the person who popularized revisionist history in the first place, and then do it as an homage to Harold Bloom, and coach it in academic humor, really good writing, turns of phrase, playful language, and this sort of, yeah, just unflinching, I guess, eye at how apolitical people have seen what Ben Zion was doing even back then, allowed it to happen, and then we're at where we are now. It is a fairly quick read, I found, really digestible. It goes quite quickly despite being quite dense, at least that's how I found it, and it has a lot of information to convey. So I can kind of see why it was picked as the Pulitzer, especially as a book that is supposed to sort of be a representation of almost like a quintessential nature of American life. It is really good at being political, dissecting extremely fraught and complex situations, injecting humor at the right times, as well as being very taut and stressful at other times, and then sort of releasing like a pressure valve the absurdist elements, and then an absolute masterful work of credits and post-credits in which he talks, specifically Cohen does, about how he constructed this book, for what purpose, what its intent is, and kind of situates it properly into how we would think about the context of this book. What elements are true, what are not, and leaves space even for a minor character to assert a real life stance on this book, but also political situation in general. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. It does have a little bit of middle book syndrome, I must say. The pacing gets a little bit lame when the shifts happen, but once it does kind of shift into what the proper meat of the story is about, and Ben Zion is present articulating, and the two men are, you know, at odds with each other, to say the least, it really picks up the pacing. You really fly through it. So I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was quite excellent. Not quite a 5-star read for me, which, given its ambition and scope of what it's doing, is, I think, quite impressive. Not many writers, I think, could pull this off and exceed the expectations that it sets. And then just the, again, meta construction of what it's doing is just something wholly new. That said, I'll also say that I really don't know too much about Jewish culture or its practices, nor the actual people centered in the narrative. But for me, it was a very enriching and powerful book that I thought was extremely good. It made me curious about the issues as well, and led me to consume more articles on this kind of stuff, because it's absolutely fascinating and, quite frankly, a little bit disturbing. So that's a quick review of the book. There's obviously much more substance to the material than I can articulate in such a short amount of time, but I wanted to put it out there because there's not that many reviews on the book, and I think it looks like a quite intimidating piece, and in some ways it is. However, if you have the correct mindset, namely academic humor, then it might be helping people that are into that find it when they're not necessarily aware of its existence, whereas casual readers are and don't know of academic humor in general or what it's attempting to do. Hopefully this video was helpful for you in deciding if you would like to pick it up or not. Feel free to tell me in the comments what you thought about the book. Any thoughts, feelings, comments, put them right where they say in the comment section. And otherwise, I will see you next video. Bye.